Hello, boys and girls. This is Mr. Wilcox. I'm here to tell you a story that will lead us into the science activity for this week. The Ducktown Basin, a story of change, mining, metals, and managing mistakes of the past. This beautiful picture is in the Smoky Mountains, Appalachian Mountains. Once upon a time, this was the land of the Cherokees. This and more of these Appalachian Mountains, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Georgia was their home. They hunted, they farmed, and lived a good life in the mountains and valleys of this rich land. But this land was in the United States, and a majority of its citizens would not believe that white Americans and American Indians could live side by side. So, in 1830, with the support and approval of President Andrew Jackson, the U.S. Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. The final vote in the House of Representatives was very close, 102 to 97. Only one representative from Tennessee voted against it. That was David Crockett, many know as Davy Crockett. He lost his next re-election bid because of the way he voted, so he wasn't popular on that. What ended up happening was the forced removal of all Indians remaining in the American Southeast across the Mississippi River to what is now Oklahoma. They were treated like prisoners. And this map shows us that there were many routes. There was not just one Trail of Tears. I hope you know that part of the route went through Smyrna. Right through Smyrna and a town that doesn't exist anymore on the map, a place called Jefferson, but Jefferson Springs nearby, part of Smyrna now, is got its name from that. But anyway, getting back to the big picture, there were many routes that the Native Americans were forced to take over land, on water, some combinations of land and water. You see, most representatives in the South were in favor of moving the American Indians west across the Mississippi. Once they were gone, then cotton-growing plantations could be expanded in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Oh, and another motivation? Gold had been discovered in Georgia, and it was to be found mostly upon lands controlled by the Cherokee. But that didn't stop people from rushing in. Yes, there was a gold rush in Georgia in 1829. How do you think that affected the progress of that legislation, the Indian Removal Act, in Congress in 1830? I think it spurred it along. Then came the discovery of copper. The county highlighted down there in blue is Polk County, Tennessee. Now, the Ducktown Basin is in the southeastern corner of our state in Polk County. It was once an expanse of red dirt with severe erosion because of copper and sulfur mining operations. Copper was discovered there in 1843, shortly after the Cherokee removal. And for the next 150 years, various mining, refining, and manufacturing operations dominated the landscape in that area. To explain the story of the Ducktown Basin, you have to know something about copper. Copper is an element that is reddish in color. A shiny penny is about the color of copper. Pipes that deliver water to your house may be made of copper, as are the electric wires that deliver electricity to your house. Copper-bottom cookware is popular too. Copper doesn't come out of the ground ready to be used. When they pulled rocks from the copper mines here, only small parts of them were copper. In order to separate the bits of copper from the rest of the rock, they had to heat it. That's a process known as smelting. Smelting was done here in this area, in this county, before the raw copper was shipped to other places. And it was this process, and not the actual mining itself, that did most of the environmental damage in the Ducktown Basin. The reason for the damage has to do with chemistry. That's a subject you'll learn more about in high school. But when you heat a rock and separate it into its elements, it releases other things into the air. You can understand this, for instance, when you burn wood, you create ash and release smoke into the air. Well, the extraction of copper from rock releases a substance called sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide, when combined with the water in the atmosphere, creates a liquid called sulfuric acid. And that can literally rain back down on the earth when it does rain. That makes acid rain. Life was crazier than the Wild West in the early days of mining. This remote area was cut off from most civilization by rocky terrain and terrible roads. Before the railroad, wagons, pulled by teams of donkeys or oxen, typically took weeks to haul supplies and copper in and out of the mountains. Therefore, miners turned to the locally available fuel to keep the smelters running: wood. By the 1870s, over 50 square miles of land had been stripped completely bare of trees. Toxic fumes that rose from the open ore roasting heaps created acid rain, which killed off the remaining vegetation. Now, the smelters were enclosed in 1904, and that's because they figured out that the acid could be trapped and used to produce sulfuric acid. Now, that sounds like nasty stuff, but actually sulfuric acid can be used in batteries and many other things, so it was actually useful. So what was it like to live here? For one thing, they say that the wind was too corrosive for tin roofs. They couldn't use tin roofs, so everybody had asphalt shingles. And the breeze could eat up a pair of nylon stockings, this would be earlier in the 20th century, hanging on a clothesline in a matter of minutes. Hard to believe, isn't it? But there were no bugs. Didn't have to worry about mosquitoes, bugs of any kind. They didn't live there. No snakes, no critters of any other kind, and there were certainly no birds. Now, I have a series of pictures taken early in the 20th century, rather. This is the acid plant in 1912. The landscape, you can see a bit of the factory in the background. What's growing there? Almost nothing. Desert. And a road has been built. Imagine the erosion when it rains, dirt and water running off by the ton. Now, that nice house on the left, that would have been for a high-ranking official with the company, maybe a superintendent. The nicer homes farther up on the hill were for those who had more seniority, higher level, and those who lived further down the hills were of a lower rank. You can tell from the vehicles, this is pretty old. I don't have an exact date on it, but a road has been built. And imagine going from Tennessee, other areas that you know are green and lush and full of trees, and driving through this. And it's all caused by that acid and by cutting down trees over many years. Here, probably mid-20th century, miner is taking a mining train load of ore out of the mine. That's one of the caverns. This is an aerial view from above looking down on the plants. You can see in the bottom, kind of toward the left, that Railroad tracks have been brought in. Lots of railroad cars can be loaded up with ore. But again, for miles and miles around, little or no vegetation. It became what they called the Tennessee Desert. Extreme erosion, by the way. Another look, some equipment and a factory in the background, and dirt and rock. Pretty ugly. I imagine they had to work hard to get the trees to grow that did grow there. I'm not sure about that patch in the middle. Even in the 1960s, it still looked this way. Now, I want to show you something else here. This photograph shows what a stream can look like once, well, this is called acid mine draining. And when there's mining going on, things come out of the earth that were not really meant to be on top of the earth. Those elements and chemicals that can create the sulfuric acid. Look what it does to the stream. Does that look healthy? Now, this is from Google Earth, and I just snatched it off the internet today. I don't have an exact date for the photo, but check out this image of the Copper Basin or Ducktown Basin area in Polk County, Tennessee. The mine shut down completely in 1987, and I think I read that the sulfuric acid plant was finally shut down in like 2001. But since that time, lots of time and effort and money have been spent to try to remove the toxic parts of the environment and to get natural growth and animals to return. Well, they made a huge amount of progress, but check out that stream cutting diagonally across the screen. It's still this orangey yellow color. Does that look like a healthy stream to you? You can follow it all the way back to the top right. Still got some room to go, don't they? The companies that owned the copper mines eventually learned to capture the sulfuric dioxide and bottle the sulfuric acid they were creating in the process. In fact, sulfuric acid became a bigger moneymaker than the copper itself. And the amount of pollution caused by the extraction process was greatly decreased as technology improved, but the damage was already done. Independent companies and the government have been trying to clean up the damage caused by the early copper mining and early extraction. They continue to do so today and probably will be continuing for years to come. Now, if you go to the museum in Ducktown, yes, that's an actual place, go to the museum now and look over a kind of ledge there. You'll get this kind of view here of a big hole filled with water. Nature didn't create that hole. There was a copper mine where the hole is. It was known as the Burra Burra mine. It's one of the mining companies. Now, the way that they mined copper here was not by digging deep pits, but by tunneling deep into the ground and then extracting rock in massive man-made underground caverns. How massive? Well, some of the copper mines here were 3,000 feet deep. That's more than half a mile. Problem is, some of these copper mines collapsed years later, creating huge holes. That's what happened here. This hole in the ground was created when part of the Burra Burra mine collapsed. It's 350 feet deep and filled with water. This is the Burra Burra Creek, I believe they call it. Still not quite the color you would expect from a fresh mountain stream, is it? Now here's where we connect with the science resource for week 2 of our distance learning activities for 4th grade. Over 100 years ago, Tennessee settlers found bits of copper in a creek. The Tennessee Copper Company was formed in 1899 and began mining copper in the Appalachian Mountains. The copper miners cut down many trees on the Tennessee mountains to use in the mining process. So many trees were removed that even years later, astronauts in space could still see the big brown spot where the Tennessee copper mine used to be. By 1928, the empty dirt land became known as the Tennessee Desert. Next, the rivers turned an ugly orange color, the color of copper pennies. The Tennessee Valley Authority began cleaning up polluted rivers in 1933, but as I've said before, we know that the real work of reclaiming this land for nature didn't begin until the mine was closed after 1987. Now, this appears in our materials we can download from the district and on my website. A little bigger for you to be able to see. Still ugly in 2004. And much better by June of 2008. Same stream. Now, the student task. I want you to go follow the links to two places. One is the newspaper site, the Chattanooga Times Free Press. That's a nice article talking about reaching a major milestone and restoring the area to, well, the way it should be in nature. The other one is the TVA site explaining the cleanup efforts. Read it carefully. You can understand it, or at least most of it. Then you have two claims. Your job is to use the websites and anything you've learned in this presentation to provide evidence for those claims. You also have the space to explain your reasoning. You can do this on paper or in a document on your computer. Now, if you want feedback on how you did, just send your finished product to me, Mr. Wilcox. Your parent can help you with that. As a preview, here are the claims. Claim number 1, human activity can affect the land and water in negative ways. We dealt with this in class earlier this year. Your job, give evidence and explain your reasoning. Second claim, human activity can affect the land and water in positive ways. Give evidence, explain your reasoning. That's our task. Be sure and keep checking back on the website to see if I put up any new links or other bits that might help you along the way. And make it interesting. Don't make it a burden. Dig into it and see what you can find out and learn. Afterward, we have another project for you to do as well. Download the document and you can read about it there.